Hey besties, I'm Shay, and welcome back to Midnight Screams. It's just me again tonight. Jill is still out, so it's just us, a blanket, maybe a snack, and a bunch of stories that are, well, let's just say people really wish they could forget. Tonight, we're diving into Reddit's Let's Not Meet stories. True encounters that make you question everything. The people you pass on the street, the neighbors you thought were normal, even the random person standing a little too close behind you in the grocery store. Some of these stories are downright terrifying. You'll find yourself checking your locks, your windows. So get cozy, turn down the lights if you want, and settle in. Keep your phone nearby just in case. Tonight, we're going to hear about the moments people never wanted to face, and I'll be sharing them with you. Ready to meet the things you hope you never do? Let's get into it. This one is called The Employee Told Me There Was a Women's Bathroom Up the Lift. There wasn't one. This happened 2 days ago, and I'm still very shaken up by it. I was with my brother and father. We were just at the immigration department in Hong Kong to sort out something for us. Further context, I'm 20 female and I'm not a Hong Kong local. It was getting late, and my dad suggested we start taking the bus back now to eat closer to the apartment area, or most good places would be closed by then. Midway there was a stop, and my brother suggested we get off and find food. We agreed. I started to desperately need the toilet, and so my brother pointed at the closest McDonald's we could see. Big mistake. We go in, my brother and dad are waiting downstairs. I was under the assumption that, well, if there's no toilet downstairs, then there should be one up. If not, I'll leave and I'll find another place. I walk up the stairs and look around, somewhat pacing as I desperately need to pee. The McDonald's worker seems to have spotted me and was looking at me, almost expecting me to bother him. I asked him if there's a toilet. He said, "Toilet?" Through the door, turn left, and take a lift up. It's an ominous brown door with no signs or anything at the front. He's the worker, so I assume he knows better than me. I open it, and what the fuck? It's very dark and run down, completely different vibe to the modern McDonald's. Extremely quiet. As soon as the door closed, it was almost soundproof. All the bustling loud noises in the McDonald's had completely stopped. The room was just dark with very minimal white light. There were multiple doors that appeared locked in the building. I didn't explore much as I thought it was maybe a staff room. I turned the left corner as instructed, and there was indeed a lift. I assume maybe this is just a very odd passage to a shopping mall, which isn't too uncommon in Hong Kong, and surely how bad can this be if there's a lift? I press the lift and step in. Suddenly, I hear the door open, and the worker that directed me goes into the lift with me as well. I notice he's holding a black bin bag that's filled with little to nothing. I assume, oh, okay, maybe he needs to put this out and help me find the toilet? Kill two birds with one stone. I ask him what floor do I press, and he presses the second floor. Once the door closes, it's a bit quiet and awkward. I glance at him for a second. He was wearing a COVID face mask, one eye looking forward, and he had a lazy eye looking to the side. Suddenly, he says, "You're very pretty." At this point, it's very awkward, and I just said a quiet thank you to not aggravate him. I'm wagering if I actually need to pee this badly now. The lift stops, finally. I was fully expecting a shopping mall when the lift doors open. That was not the case. The doors opened, and it was just a dark, quiet, very run-down, narrow hallway of doors. It was so dark with infinite corners. Not a single person was there but us. I couldn't tell what the building was, an odd cross of abandoned apartment building doors and office doors. At this point, we're both still stood in the lift, and my entire body is in a fight or flight response as this whole situation was making me fear the worst. The worker gestures me to get off at this lift and almost wants to continue walking me to the toilet. I quickly make an excuse of, "I bothered you so much already from your work. You can just point at the direction and I'll find it, promise." He points to the right and tells me to go through there, and that's the toilet. I thank him and then go the complete opposite direction he told me. The whole place was like a fucking maze. Narrow hallway with doors. I got curious and pushed at one of them, and it was locked. At this point, I'm really trying to stall enough time to appear I went to the toilet before getting the lift back down. I get a call from my brother now, a very angry call asking why I've taken so long and where am I. I explain I don't know where I am. I'm trying to find my way back. I hang up and I'm getting increasingly more scared as the place is giant, as I mentioned, like an abandoned office/apartment hallways with no signs or anything, while being extremely dark with minimal light. The walls were all torn down. It's just so quiet and run down, there's no way a functioning toilet was up here. I'm really panicking now and trying to find my way back to the lift, scared shitless. My initial discomfort of desperately needing to pee turned into desperately wanting to leave. I calmed myself down a bit with breathing exercises and tried to recollect the steps I took. Finally found the lift and quickly pressed back down. I pressed the close button so much. The lift takes me back down to the hallway, but by accident I walk forward instead of turning right. What the fuck? There are more doors, 4 to 5 doors next to each other, but what was the most strange was the fact that the doors were all facing this large glass panel wall between the McDonald's. I was able to look at the McDonald's and people eating, but they didn't notice I was there at all. I walked back and turned right this time, through the door. I was finally in the McDonald's again, but that glass wall on my end appeared to be a large mirror in the McDonald's. It was a double mirror. I looked around and there was no sight of the McDonald's worker either. I quickly walked back down the McDonald's. I see my dad and brother. My dad asked if I was okay as I looked really pale. I said I'll tell him when we're out. I asked him if he saw the worker again when they were waiting, describing him as a man with a mask on and a lazy eye. My dad shook his head and said he didn't see any worker when he checked upstairs for me earlier. My heart dropped as soon as I heard that. The worker was still up the lift. My dad also said, "Don't tell me you went through that lift. I opened that door and walked through a bit to find you. It was scary. Why were there so many doors and that glass? I thought there was something wrong. Got out immediately." Bear in mind, my dad is a built-as-fuck man himself. He then sent my brother to go up to look for me. Not sure why. My brother is pretty skinny and unathletic in comparison. He opened the door just to see and noped the fuck out. He described it as looking like a big dark back room with the doors next to each other back to back. He did not want to walk in there to explore. I will never go to the toilets alone again, and staying at McDonald's will forever hold this memory for me. Edit. Found out recently, apparently, they devised a plan that my dad was going to go through every level through the brown door to start kicking down doors and shouting my name. He had a very bad feeling. If he wasn't back down or back down with me within 15 minutes, my brother was instructed to call the police. My brother disagreed with the plan, suggesting it'll be best if they find all the exits and guard them now, banking on the fact that I'll be out at some point, as it's unlikely they'll find me through every level in that lift and doors. I asked what would happen if I didn't come out through the exits, and he said, "At least we'll find your remains." Morbid. Okay, no, I don't care how bad. Okay, y'all, I don't care how bad I have to pee. No, you're not gonna catch me. You're not gonna catch me in no backrooms, lift shit like that. No, I don't care. I'm running out of there. Like, you expect like the employee, and who knows, like maybe he really was trying to lead her to the toilet, but no, that is so creepy. Backrooms shit. No. Let's never meet McDonald's worker, man. Let's never meet. Okay, on to the next story. The time I was hunted. Back in 1998, I was a pretty broke 19-year-old guy and living with a roommate named Steve. Steve was about my age, maybe a year older. His dad had died a few years prior and had left Steve a trust fund which covered all his bills and gave him a weekly allowance on top of it until he reached a certain age, at which time he'd receive his full inheritance. Steve and I got along pretty well, but he was the kind of guy who liked to remind you he had some degree of power over you. That aspect of his personality butted up against my own stubborn, prove the world wrong attitude on a particular night, leading to the events I'm about to describe. Steve and I went over to my friend Trevor's house on Siesta Key one night. Steve drove as I didn't have a car. I don't remember why we went over there, and I don't even know that I really remember any other instance of the three of us hanging out. I just know that we went there later in the evening, maybe 9 o'clock or so. At some point, Steve and I got in a disagreement over something. I have no memory of what it was about, except that I seem to recall that it wasn't anything important that actually impacted our lives in any way. Something akin to disagreeing over a bit of movie trivia or something as inconsequential as that. Steve must have felt that he was losing the debate because he took the opportunity to remind me that he had the car and I could always walk home. Now, there are a few things to note here. First, home would be a 13-mile walk. I could not have told you that at the time, but I just looked it up for this telling. Second, we were at my best friend's house. I stayed over there countless times and absolutely could have that night. Third, my best friend also had a car and would likely have given me a ride. So Steve's threat was completely empty, whether he realized it or not. But what was important to me at that moment was that Steve, the trust fund brat, wanted to exert control over me because his ego was bruised. And I was a stubborn hothead who would absolutely not stand for that shit. So I silently decided that I would walk home, just to fucking spite him and show him that I would not be intimidated. So a bit later, under the pretense of going to use the restroom, I left the room and quietly left the house and started the 13-mile walk home. I should note that, while I knew this was a long walk, I didn't quite understand how long it was. But it didn't matter. I needed to prove my independence. It was probably 11 p.m. or so when I left the house. I anticipated that they'd come looking for me when they discovered that I'd left, so I tried to stay off the main pass as best I could, determined to make the whole walk in order to make my point. This may be a good place to remind you that this is 1998, and a good 2 or 3 years later before I got my first cell phone. The first hour and a half went by without incident. I made my way all the way downtown Sarasota. The more direct route would have been to follow the main road along the waterfront, but I cut through downtown, still looking to avoid Steve spotting me on his way back home. This is an area I was super comfortable with. I spent most of my childhood in the area, and especially in my teen years, had explored every nook and cranny of the downtown area. It was also a pretty affluent area, full of high-rise condos that look out over the Gulf of Mexico and known for theater, opera, and art galleries. As such, even past midnight, it didn't feel menacing at all, just quiet and empty. The path I'd chosen through downtown went along Pineapple Avenue, which was mostly art galleries and upscale shops. As I walked along, I saw a red hatchback sitting in the middle of the road, just a little way past an intersection up ahead of me. I noticed it had no license plate, but I didn't think too much of it. I figured it was a tag applied for kind of situation. As I got nearer, the car remained stopped. The interior light was on, and I could see there were 3 or 4 guys in there. The interior light being on made me assume they were looking at a map or something, though I couldn't make out the inside of the car well enough to see anything more than the general shapes of the people. As I crossed a small intersection maybe 30 or 40 feet away from the car now, I suddenly got a really uneasy feeling. I don't know if the car was still for just too long, or the figures inside too still, or what. I just suddenly got very ill at ease. So, instead of continuing on, I casually turned down the left street, and as soon as the corner of the building blocked me from their view, I bolted. This was a spot where a small access road ran behind these buildings and then connected to an alley and then another, very thin alley that ran alongside a church and ended back on Pineapple Avenue, right where the red car was. I ran this sequence of alleys and popped out just in time to see the rear end of the car vanish down the street I had run down. At this point, I wasn't scared at all. I had the idea that the guys in the car had something unpleasant in mind for me, but I knew damn well that I'd given them the shake. There's no way in hell that they'd expect me to be back where they started. If they were looking for me, it was going to be elsewhere. So I continued along, feeling smug. After 10 or 15 minutes, I pretty much had to get out on the main road because the alternative was walking through a seedy neighborhood that I wasn't nearly as confident about as I was downtown. As I approached the first big intersection along that main road, I saw the red car again up ahead, noticeable by the lack of license plate. I kind of grinned to myself about having foiled them. On this big road, there were some other cars here and there even at this late hour, so I feel less isolated and more at ease. Until I saw the car slow to a crawl, despite not being anywhere near the light yet. Suddenly, I found myself wondering if they might have spotted me again. So I decided just to cross the other side of the street. It's a US highway, so it's several lanes wide, with a median down the center. Being on the other side would put me a fair distance from them, but when I got to the other side, that's when I realized I was in actual danger. The red hatchback suddenly sped up, racing to the intersection ahead and zipped over to the left lane, where it banged a tire screeching U-turn to head back in my direction. Where I had crossed was a nice green space between the History Center and the Garden Club, where a gigantic tree stood. I think it was a banyan. I could be mistaken. On the other side of that green space was a parking lot, some buildings, and the bay. I wasn't familiar enough with what was back there to be able to pull a trick like I had before, so I climbed. I got as high into that tree as I could, as fast as I could. I always dressed in all black then, so I was pretty confident I'd be nearly impossible to spot, as long as they didn't actually climb up after me. So I got up and nestled into the most hidden spot I could and tried not to make any noise at all. Hiding up in the tree, I was so surrounded by foliage that I couldn't see what was going on. On the plus side, that meant that they were really unlikely to see me. On the other hand, I didn't know what to prepare myself for. So I sat up there, running through scenarios in my head, trying to plan my next move. Even if I hadn't been outnumbered, flight was really my only option. As speedy and as scrappy I was at 5'3", no fight I put up was likely to do much good. As I sat on the branch trying to plan my next move, my blood ran cold. Any remaining doubt about what was happening, any fleeting hope that I was just being paranoid, flew out the window as I heard car doors open and close, heard footsteps in the grass, and eventually an angry male voice say, "Where is this motherfucker?" Followed by a, "Look over there, I'll check this area." It was official. I was being hunted. I don't know how long I stayed up that tree. It could have been more than 10 minutes, and more likely it was quite a bit less than that, but it felt like forever. At some point, I decided to risk another flight, even though I can't remember what triggered it. Car doors, the car driving away, I just can't remember. I do remember jumping from the tree and landing with a hard thud and bolting back the way I came as fast as I could, terrified that whatever sound made me feel like it was safe to come out of hiding had been a ploy to draw me out. The intersection where they had made the U-turn was a 24-hour gas station, of course, across both roads. All I could think was that if I could make it inside, I would be safe and I could call the police. That run is a total blur, but I remember going through the door. I remember the look on the clerk's face as he saw my panicked expression. I called the police and explained what happened, and I waited inside for them to arrive. When they got there, I went out front to meet them and explained everything to the only officer who actually spoke to me. He was not sympathetic. I had described the car in detail as well as all the events, and he said that they probably thought I was a male prostitute and were trying to pick me up. I thought to ask him if prostitutes get a lot of business by fleeing from prospective Johns and hiding in trees, but I was distracted by the sight of the red hatchback slowly cruising by, watching me talk to the police. I pointed to the car and exclaimed that was the car. The police seemed entirely uninterested. He glanced at the car for half a second and looked back at me and said, "What do you want me to do about it?" "I don't want to walk anymore," I exclaimed. I'm sure there are better ways I could have articulated that there were people attempting to capture me for unknown nefarious purposes, and that I was in fear for my life should they encounter me on the street again. But "I don't want to walk anymore" was all I was capable of in that moment. The cop pointed to the side of the police car and said, "You see what that says there? It says police, not taxi." His condescending attitude was doing a great job to replace my fear with some of the brash attitude that had gotten me into this situation in the first place. So I replied, "It also says to serve and protect, and I'm asking you to protect me because I think I'm in danger." He gave a sigh like a teenager asked to do the dishes and told me that he can't take me all the way because I lived in the next town and county over, but that he'd take me to the county line, which is another major intersection along that same main highway. That was still a good 5.5 miles from my house, and again, a number I just looked up for this telling, but got me off the road for almost 3 miles and made it less likely these people would find me again. The cops dropped me off in front of the museum, and I walked another 2 hours or so, looking over my shoulder constantly, ready to run down the side streets or jump into the bushes if need be. My girlfriend's house was slightly closer than my own, and with the sun now rising, I knew she'd be okay with me stopping in. In the end, I made it safely and never saw that red car again. Almost 30 years later, I still sometimes wonder what might have become of me if they had gotten their hands on me. That determination they showed in pursuing me leads me to believe that nothing I can imagine, no matter how bad, is outside the realm of possibility. So, hunting party in the red hatchback? Let's not meet. Okay, that was a great story. Terrifying. Terrifying. But I'm like, that would so be me. Like, just to prove a point, I'd be like, ew. I'm gonna show him that I can freaking walk. Like, I don't care, buddy. Like, your threats mean nothing to me. Like, that sounds so me. Like, just prove a point, and then something fucking happens. Like, oh shit. Now, look who's fucking tough now. But that's terrifying. Like, what did they want with you? What did you even do? Like, you were just walking. Like, did they think you saw them doing something? Like, and like you thought you caught them doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, and like thought you were gonna go tell. Like, I don't know. Like, what did they want with you? Like, that's scary. That's terrifying. So yeah, I don't blame you. People in the red car, let's not meet. Okay. So our next story is gonna be the time I narrowly escaped a crime of passion and revenge. This is super long, but a good read, so buckle up. Back in junior high, I started dating this guy. He's now my husband. But since we were so young, we had one of those classic on and off relationships all throughout high school. During one of our off periods, I was going through some typical teenage girl drama and lost most of my friends. This was during COVID, and with nothing else to do, I got into gaming and ended up becoming close with a group of guys I met online. They also went to my school. I know what you're thinking. Ugh, one of those girls who only hangs out with guys because they're less drama. Nope. If anything, guy friend groups are more drama when you're the only girl. Anyway, I developed a small crush on one of the guys. Let's call him Kyle. Not my usual type, but he was funny and easy to talk to, especially after a breakup. I told him I wasn't ready to date again yet, but I liked him and I could see things going somewhere eventually. He didn't take that well. He kept rushing me, wanting to lock something down, and every time I asked for space, he got mad. Like, blow up on me and kick me out of the group chat mad. He'd start fights, try to turn the others against me, didn't really work, thankfully, and was constantly checking if I still liked him if I took too long to reply. It was exhausting. Clingy is fine, but manipulative clingy? Not so much. I had extracurriculars, a life, and he acted like I owed him 24/7 attention. Despite all the drama, we kissed a couple of times, but we were never official. Eventually, I found out other guys in the group liked me too, and the whole situation got weird. I ended up cutting ties with all of them. Months later, I got back together with my now husband. That really pissed Kyle off. He started posting music on SoundCloud and Spotify, basically painting me as the villain. Songs about how I led him on, how awful I was, etc. But I was happy, so I ignored it. Fast forward to about a year after graduation. My now husband had just proposed. We were thrilled, posted the engagement photos, the whole thing. We got nearly 700 likes on Instagram as our whole high school anticipated this happening. Then, coincidentally, almost a day after we posted the photos, Kyle texts me asking us if we want to meet up. So my husband says, why not? And we end up going to hang out with Kyle. I know, it was a dumb idea, but since my husband was about to leave for the military, we figured it couldn't hurt to reconnect with some people before everything changed. Kyle picks us up. He seems insanely excited to see us, which is really weird since we don't really talk and weren't left off on a good note. We drive to the mall, walk around, grab food, pretty normal stuff. We caught up on the year since graduation, but even during that, I could tell something about him had shifted. His smile didn't feel real. His eyes were off, like he was looking through us. We get back in the car and started driving aimlessly through town. It's late, probably around 10 p.m. No traffic, everything's quiet. Then he starts speeding. Not like a fun little thrill. No. He's like pushing 110 in a 30 zone, flying through red lights, swerving around corners like he's trying to get us killed. I half laughed at first, thinking he was just showing off, but he kept doing it. He casually mentioned how the seatbelts in the car don't really work and how he isn't a great driver. Then came the real red flags. He starts talking about how he's not wired like other people, said he doesn't really feel anything when people die. No sadness, no guilt, just nothing. He even said, I think I might be a little psychotic. My husband kind of shrugged it off with an awkward, that's not good. But I remember sitting there, heart pounding, suddenly hyper aware of the locked doors, the broken seatbelt, and how fast we were going. He starts bringing up how badly I hurt him when we were 15 and that he never mentally recovered. I obviously said sorry and that I was a stupid teenager, but I thought that we were past this since we both made mistakes. The whole car ride was just off. He was blasting these songs he made about me. Weird lyrics, obsessive. My husband and I exchanged a glance, but we let it go. Eventually, he pulls into this massive park in the middle of town, the one with that huge new staircase they built on the mountain. No one else is around. It's pitch black. He goes, Do you guys want to go for a walk? We get out and start walking. The stairs go high, higher than they look from the road. I'm already uncomfortable, but I go anyway. About halfway up, my knee starts acting up, old basketball injury. So I tell them I'm staying put. Kyle stops too and starts talking again. This time about how he feels like he never really got closure, how he still dreams about me, how he's never been able to connect with anyone else the same way. He says this while my fiance is standing right there. The tension is unbearable. My husband tries to keep things chill, even jokes lightly, but you can tell he's ready to leave and is getting a little worked up. Eventually, Kyle keeps going. He walks way ahead and then yells back, You guys should come up here. It's crazy. Just look at this drop. We glance up. He's standing at this unfinished part of the staircase, near a ledge with nothing but raw cement below. One wrong step and that's it. My husband looks at me and then calls back, Nah, we're good. Let's head back. Back in the car, it's tense. He's fidgety, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. He breaks the silence by saying, If I had a gun right now, I don't know what I'd do. Just like that, calm, cold, no emotion in his voice. My body locked up. I didn't even know what to say. My husband leaned forward and asked if he was okay. Kyle just gave a weird little smirk and looked away. He said, I'm good, just making conversation. We were utterly spooked and kept mentioning that we were tired and ready to go home, but he literally wouldn't take us. Finally, a cop car slowly rolls into the parking lot. Normal, right? We weren't doing anything wrong. Maybe Kyle was just unfiltered like how I knew him in high school. But Kyle loses it, starts panicking, slamming the steering wheel, breathing fast. He mutters, If he pulls us over, just say we're having a threesome. What? We blink at him. That made no sense. We weren't high, we weren't drunk, we weren't even being loud, but he's acting like he's running from something. Something worse. The cop doesn't stop us, just passes by. Kyle pulls out of the lot fast, then drives us straight home without another word. He doesn't even say goodbye when we get out, just speeds off. Was it just me, or did it feel like he was trying to kill us? And I didn't even hesitate. No, I said, it wasn't just you. After that night, we didn't talk to Kyle, like, at all. We both agreed it was weird. Too weird. My husband said he couldn't shake the feeling that we'd narrowly avoided something awful. And honestly, same. The way Kyle stared from that ledge, blank, like he was watching and waiting for something to happen. The things he was saying in the car, driving so recklessly, how freaked he got about the cop. The next weekend, we had made plans to meet up with some more old friends, the guys in the initial friend group where Kyle and I met. Turns out they had all cut Kyle off. I hadn't realized how serious it was. There had been some more drama. Apparently, Kyle had been dating a girl, we will call her Sarah, who cheated on one of the guys in the group. Things got messy. Sarah ended up pregnant but wanting nothing to do with Kyle. Sarah claimed the baby wasn't his. Now that the kid is born, it really does look like the guy she says is the father. But still, heavy emotional stuff. And Kyle, he didn't seem to be coping. We told them about our strange night with him, about the car ride, the creepy conversation, the ledge. They didn't even flinch. One of them actually said, Yeah, that sounds like something he'd do. But then they brushed it off. Jealous maybe, but harmless, one of them said. Still, the more we talked, the darker it got. It told us that when Kyle found out I was engaged, he went off the deep end. Full-on drinking rampage, punched holes in the walls, tried to fight another guy from the group, who, by the way, is one of the gentlest people you'll ever meet and who is on the spectrum. Then Kyle disappeared for a few days, wouldn't answer text, wouldn't call back. When he finally resurfaced, it was like nothing happened. Just showed up at their condo like he hadn't dropped off the grid after threatening one of his closest friends. Smiled, laughed, acted normal. No apologies, and no explanation. Weeks go by. My husband ships out for training. I stay in town but move back with my parents to wrap things up before I move when he's done. My parents live about 30 minutes outside of town. It's a very, very small community. They have about 3 acres of land and it's a dirt road leading only to their house. I always felt safe there, though since we had cameras everywhere and everyone in the community owns guns, including my dad. If someone was on the dirt road, my dad would sit on the porch with a gun since we never had any uninvited visitors. Then I started getting messages from Kyle. Said he wanted to hang out one more time before my husband left for the military. I told him we were busy. He didn't respond after that. Then weird stuff kept happening. One night, I swear I saw his car drive by the dirt road in front of the house. This was insanely strange because, like I said, we are pretty secluded. Another time, I noticed a notification from a random burner account viewing my Instagram stories. Always the first viewer. Every time I blocked it, a new one would pop up. No posts, no followers, just watching. I tried to tell myself it wasn't him, but I knew it was. I started getting messages from another burner account. They're not threatening exactly, but they're off. Long rants about people being fake, how no one really understands loyalty, and these cryptic comments like, "You're lucky, he's lucky, it could have been different, but I let it go." Let what go? I don't respond. He tells me, "It's Kyle, by the way." I figure he's just spiraling, maybe going through something. I blocked the account and set mine to private. We never saw him again in person. He just kind of disappeared after that. No mutual friends mentioned him, no posts, nothing. It was like he dropped off the map. 6 months later, I reunited with my husband and we moved several states away to a military base. Life finally felt calm again. Then, out of nowhere, we got a call from one of the guys from the old friend group. A bunch of them were still roommates, so they were all together when the call came in. It started like this: "Did you hear what happened?" "What? Is everything okay?" "Kyle tried to break into Sarah's house." I just froze. Why would he do that? He claimed the baby was his, said she'd been lying to him the whole time. According to them, Sarah said he'd showed up out of nowhere, managed to get inside, and at some point, while holding the baby, he tried to take her. In the chaos, she said he somehow stabbed her. He was arrested not long after. That's probably why no one had heard from him, why he vanished. But then it got worse. The guys told me that when he was arrested, they found a notebook. It had our names on every page, Sarah's and mine. Obsessive stuff, pages and pages of graphic, violent fantasies about killing our significant others, about R-wording us in front of our husbands, and if he couldn't have us like that, he wrote that he'd end all of us together. It'd been 3 years. I still have nightmares. I sometimes dread that one day that I'll have to explain the whole thing to my kids and tell them to be careful with their high school flings, as they can either end like my husband and I, married, together for 10 years, or like Kyle, still seeking revenge for a petty kiss and a crush 5 years later. I often think about that one night on the staircase, about how he kept calling us to come up, kept saying how crazy the drop was. What if we had gone? What if we hadn't stopped halfway? What if I never had that basketball injury or my husband to put his foot down? If that cop hadn't shown up and spooked him just enough, maybe things would have ended very differently. But they didn't, and I think that's the only reason I'm still here to tell this story. The scariest part isn't what he did, it's how close we were to being the headline instead. That was crazy. That was a crazy story. Terrifying. Like, that man, Kyle, he full blown crazy. Full blown crazy. Like, I can't imagine being in the car with someone like that, them driving like a maniac, and then like stopping for one. I'd be like, "No, you're taking me home. You are taking me home." And then stopping and like, "Oh, let's get out. Like, look at this drop." No, I will not be. I will not be going with you to look at the drop since you're fucking talking crazy. I'd be getting out and like yelling help to that cop. Like, no. Mm-mm. Kyle, let's never meet. That's just crazy and scary. And what happened to Sarah? That's terrifying. Hopefully she's okay. But something was wrong with him, And I feel like if they would have walked up those stairs, they probably would have been killed, which is terrifying. So yeah, let's not meet, Kyle. All right. This is the last story. I moved in with my stalker. This is my story about being stalked. Dealing with this has been difficult, and throughout the ordeal, I felt out of control, so I'm sharing this to gain control over my story. The story is long as it spanned over 2 years. Several years ago, I moved abroad to begin a 2-year study course. When I arrived at my apartment, I met 3 of my roommates. Sam was funny and sarcastic, while Bella and Poppy were both nice sorority-type girls. We decided to go out for dinner, and I offered to invite our 4th roommate in 1C next to mine. Sam warned me not to invite her, saying she was odd. I was worried because I didn't want to live with a bunch of catty girls. How were they fighting in less than a day? I smiled and told Sam that she just made a bad first impression and I would invite her to get to know her better. Sam grumbled as I left the kitchen, approaching the door next to mine. I knocked and the door opened. A short, petite girl with long brown hair and a childlike face stuck her head out. I introduced myself and invited her to dinner. The girl's face lifted at my invitation, and she nodded in agreement. Our excitement about the new school year kept us lively as we arrived at the restaurant. I decided to befriend the girl in room 1C since we were sharing a bathroom. I learned that her name was Nellie. We were the same age, from the same state, and in the same program. I ordered a Jack and Coke as Nellie leaned into me and asked if I actually drank alcohol. I nodded, thinking her question was odd. We were both in our 20s. Of course I drank alcohol. Nellie focused her attention on me while we ate. As I got to know Nellie, I kind of felt bad for her. She was born in Sri Lanka, but immigrated as a kid, and since she had an accent and a lisp, I assumed she was bullied. Nellie was different from me. She was shy and claimed to not have hobbies or friends, but I figured that since we were in the same program, I could befriend her. I asked if she wanted to sit with me in class, and she happily agreed. I felt content knowing that I was befriending her like I was doing a good deed. My first 2 weeks abroad went smoothly. I got used to my surroundings, made friends, and got along with my roommates. Sam, Bella, Poppy, and I would often cook and eat dinner together while chatting about our days. Nellie and I got along, but she was socially awkward. I made it my goal to befriend her, which was easy because we sat together and lecture every day. We even opened our bedroom doors in unison. I would open my door, then Nellie would open hers, and ask me where I was going. One night, I left my room to go grocery shopping when Nellie's door opened and she asked to join me. I agreed and she hurriedly put on her sandals and neon pink coat. I walked through the aisle. Nellie silently followed closely behind me. Eventually, I found everything I needed, but Nellie said that she wasn't buying anything. After I paid for everything, we began to exit the store and the alarms went off. I stopped to show the security guard my receipt and he looked in my bags, confirming I had not stolen anything. I didn't think much of this incident, but when I stood at the front of the store with Nellie for the 4th time as my bags were searched by the security, a thought crept into my mind. The alarms never rang when I was alone or with friends. They only rang when I was with Nellie. I shook my head. Nellie couldn't be stealing. I was with her the whole time. She was a perfectly nice, normal girl, and I was rude to think anything contrary. The harmony in the apartment only lasted 2 weeks. One morning, I shuffled into the bathroom and saw that the toilet was completely filled with 2 or 3 rolls of dry, unraveled toilet paper spilling onto the floor. However, what concerned me the most was the huge wad of hair that sat directly on top of the toilet paper. I knew then that it was Nellie who had done this. She was the only other person with a bathroom key, and her hair color was a match. I tried to think of any reason Nellie would do this. Maybe she clogged the toilet, then stuffed it with toilet paper to hide her business, but that didn't explain the wad of hair. I couldn't harp on the issue though, so I made a maintenance request to have someone unclog the toilet, and when I came home from class, the toilet was unclogged. I studied for 2 hours before going back into the bathroom. I was annoyed when I found the toilet clogged again, toilet paper, hair and all. This obviously wasn't a mistake anymore, and now we were out of toilet paper. I knew I had to say something, but I didn't want to directly confront Nellie about this awkward topic. So I sent a passive, non-aggressive text. Hey, if something goes wrong with the toilet, can you make the maintenance request right away, please? I sent the message, careful not to make it accusatory. I didn't want there to be tension with Nellie, especially since she still sat in class with me. Nellie never acknowledged the situation. She still opened her door with mine, hung out with me, and sat with me in class. For the next 2 months, I just dealt with the constant toilet paper and torn out hair. I tried sending more texts, but it didn't help. Nellie would clog the toilet, I'd make a maintenance request, a staff member would clean Nellie's mess, and then she would do it again. Eventually, after 12 clogged toilets, I was so annoyed that I decided to confront Nellie. Nellie, I know you're clogging the toilet and you need to stop. If you do it again, I'm going to report you. I pressed send as I walked to class. I decided that I wouldn't sit with Nellie anymore. I had different friends to sit with who didn't clog my toilet. As I sat down with Reagan and Charlotte, I felt bad seeing Nellie sit alone across the lecture hall. I promised myself that I'd still be friends with her and that everything would be fine. I was happy that the holiday break was soon and that Nellie never addressed me not sitting with her. My message had worked. Nellie stopped clogging the toilet and we were still friends. But I came home one day early in December and my nose scrunched in disgust. There was a sickly, sweet, rotten yogurt-like smell coming from Nellie's room. I didn't want to confront Nellie so soon after messaging her about the toilet. So, for 2 weeks, I avoided the problem. I didn't address the issue until 2 weeks later, when all of our food started to rot almost immediately after buying it. Bella, Sam, and Poppy were complaining about how maintenance hadn't found the source of what was causing our food to rot when I brought up the horrible smell and a fly infestation. The girls went to go smell the hallway outside of Nellie's room and returned a minute later coughing and gagging. We talked about what might be causing the smell when Sam brought up seeing Nellie at 2 a.m. skipping through the woods. Sam was heading back from the club and Nellie was skipping around like a possessed doll, according to Sam. As we spoke, Nellie entered the kitchen and everyone fell quiet. Sam bluntly asked Nellie what the smell in her room was, and Nellie just silently shrugged her shoulders. Annoyed by this, Sam stood up and grabbed Nellie's arm, guiding her into the hallway as the rest of us followed, covering our noses with our sleeves. Nellie claimed not to smell anything, but her eyes were darting rapidly between the three of us. Sam made a sarcastic comment towards Nellie as we returned to the kitchen without Nellie. Sam was a bit harsh, and a part of me felt bad for Nellie. At least Christmas would be relaxing. I spent 2 weeks at a friend's house with her family for Christmas. They were all welcoming, so I didn't miss home too much. My friend knew about Nellie, so she brought me scented candles for Christmas. When I returned to the apartment, I felt rested and equipped to face the new year. My January exams were online and pretty easy, so I was surprised when Nellie texted me asking if I would cheat with her on the final exam. Politely declined, and she asked if I would go to lunch the next day. I had no plans, so I accepted her invitation. I spent a lot of time with her, but she never actually spoke much, so despite everything, I wanted to get to know her better. Once we were at the restaurant, I racked my brain for things I could talk about with Nellie. Attempting to break the awkward silence, I asked her what her favorite show was. Nellie told me that she loves to watch Sophia the First. I was confused. Sophia the First is a Disney toddler show that came out when we were teens. Why was she watching a show for toddlers in her 20s? I didn't know how to expand on what she said, so I changed the topic and asked what her favorite hobby was. Nellie giggled and said, "I do this a lot actually. I listen to you through the walls. They're so thin. I barely put my ear against it. I hear you talk to your parents every day." I tried not to look horrified as I sat there confused and a little scared. Nellie started laughing. "You're like a mother, but I'm like an aunt and we're sisters together." I smiled awkwardly and nodded. I had no clue how to respond. In a desperate attempt to change topics, I asked her about her childhood in Sri Lanka. Nellie slammed her fists on the table, sending my rice flying off the plate. Nellie yelled that she was not from Sri Lanka, and I apologized, even though she definitely told me she was from Sri Lanka. Nellie began to laugh again. "I have plans for us tonight. We'll go to the graveyard and walk around. You'll be scared, but I'll have fun with you." Nellie's eyes were opened incredibly wide, and her mouth seemed to be more open than usual. She was scaring me, and I didn't want to be rude, so I said I'd invite our other roommates too. At that, Nellie let go of her fork and quickly moved her hand onto mine. She insisted that we had to go alone. I pulled my hand back, attempting to hide my grimace, and stuttered out a disingenuous maybe. Nellie leaned back, slowly rolling her head from one side to the other, and mumbled about how fun it will be. The rest of our lunch was silent. When we got back to the apartment, I said goodbye to her and went into my room. I didn't call my parents that night. I went to bed early, hoping to quell my anxiety and get some much-needed rest. The next day, I did laundry, went shopping, and by 2 p.m., I was meal prepping for the week. I jumped when Nellie asked me to go to the movies with her. I hadn't heard her come into the kitchen, but there she stood, her head down and eyes turned up, staring at me. I declined her request, but she repeated her question. I politely declined once again, trying to offset her bizarre vibe. Nellie didn't respond and retreated back to her room, then left for the movies. An hour later, I went to the bathroom, and when I opened the door, I gagged immediately. The smell was bad, but the sight was worse. The walls, floors, door, sink, and toilet were covered in smeared poop and blood. I could see distinct handprints. I closed the door, trying not to puke. I was shocked that Nellie had done this, but my shock turned into anger as I messaged Nellie. What you did is weird and disgusting. You need to clean it. I'm going to report you. I pressed send. I no longer cared about being friends with Nellie. I felt gross, so I went to our shower room next to the bathroom, but Nellie ruined that too. There was toilet paper shoved in the shower drain and wads of toilet paper crusted onto the walls. I was livid at this point, but I had to wait until Monday to report her, so I laid down to take a nap. 2 hours later, I was awoken by Nellie slamming the front door. I heard her footsteps until her feet were visible through the crack under my door. I expected her to knock, but she didn't. Instead, Nellie began to continuously chirp like a bird. She briefly paused, then began twisting my doorknob in unison with her chirps. I stood there, unnerved, as Nellie did this for 5 minutes. Then Nellie began to rapidly knock on my door and call my phone. 7 times she called, hung up, then called again, while still rapidly knocking. Nellie then began to ram her body into my door, over and over again. The shock of it made me stumble back onto my bed. Then, as suddenly as it started, Nellie stopped, her feet still visible under my door. My phone buzzed, and I slowly unlocked it, staring down in horror at Nellie's text. The cockroach screamed, "Why do this to me? Because you couldn't be positive in a negative situation," the doctor said. The doctor pulls off the cockroach's legs, and it cries. The doctor has no choice. The cockroach must be killed and its family taken away. You are the funny cockroach. I was terrified as Nellie began to knock and chirp. I was scared to call the cops because I was on a visa, and if they didn't believe me, I could be deported for making a false report. I texted Poppy and Bella, who had heard everything. Nellie stood there for an hour straight, occasionally pushing her fingers through the crack under my door. When Bella's boyfriend arrived, his presence scared Nellie away. We met up and talked about what happened before going to bed. That night I barely slept. I was too scared. I woke the next day anxious about the previous night's events. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't that bad. However, as I peeked into the bathroom, its condition suggested otherwise. Charlotte and Reagan were skipping class, so I sat alone. I saw Nellie enter the room, bypass her regular seat, weave through the aisles, and inspect each row as she passed. I sank in my chair as she got closer, horrified by the realization that she was searching for me. With the last night's memories fresh in my mind, I froze in fear when Nellie found me and robotically bent down to meet my eye line as she sat next to me with her mouth twisted up in a sinister smile. I did nothing as she sat next to me, too scared to move and worried that any tiny shift may cause her to attack. When the professor dismissed us, I shot up, frantically packing my things. Nellie asked where I was going, and I lied to her, saying I was going to the cafe. I didn't want her to know where I was. So I went home for lunch, and as I stood in the kitchen, the door opened. You weren't at the cafe. Nellie's eyes darted up to me. She was looking at a knife on the table. I apologized and told Nellie my plans had changed. My heart raced as I asked her if she liked the lecture. Nellie didn't respond. She just stared with her head tilted and mouth agape. I asked again, but she still didn't answer. I faced her, afraid she'd use the knife on me. She glared so intently that her veins were protruding. She stood there for 10 minutes before leaving. Later on, I walked to the library and froze as I saw Nellie's pink jacket behind me. I turned to see Nellie staring at me with vacant eyes. She followed me into the library, up to the 3rd floor, and then sat directly behind me. With her threat still fresh on my mind, I moved to a different spot, but Nellie followed me. I tried again, but she still followed. I was scared to be isolated in a library with her, so I decided to leave. I quickly weaved through the bookshelves, desperately trying to reach the lobby, but Nellie matched my pace. I was nearing a heart attack when I ran into my guardian angel, Sam. "Nellie's following me," I blurted out. Sam looked at Nellie, who had stopped 5 feet behind me. Sam nonchalantly told Nellie to fuck off. I was surprised when Nellie did just that. After Sam and I spoke for a bit, my phone buzzed. It was Nellie, inviting me to the graveyard that night. Sam told me that I'd be smart to move out, and she was right. I needed to report Nellie and move out. It wasn't safe for me to live in that apartment anymore. I needed to get away. I went to Reagan's apartment, as she was the closest person I had to family while I was abroad. She gave me refuge while listening to me retell the last 48 miserable hours of my life. She reassured me that I could stay with her, and as I held back tears, my phone buzzed. Sam texted that she needed help and to go to the apartment ASAP. I was hesitant to go back there, but I couldn't just abandon Sam, so I grabbed my stuff and told Reagan I'd be back soon. I walked to my apartment and stared up at it, feeling a lot like the priest in the Exorcist movie. When I got to my door, I was immediately greeted by 3 roommates' distraught faces. I followed them into the apartment, and my eyes grew wide as Sam pushed open the kitchen door to reveal a truly demonic sight. Huge amounts of congealed red and orange liquid pooled across the floor, leading beneath our table, where a small bird laid dead with its wings outstretched and its head missing. I felt sick. The windows don't open, so it didn't get in here all by itself. Nellie had either found the bird and brought it in the kitchen, or she killed and decapitated a living bird and then put it in the kitchen. I didn't like either of those options. I assured my roommates that I would report Nellie that night, and that's exactly what I did. I spoke to the school safety board, and things moved fast. I discovered that Nellie had lied to us about her name and age. Officials in hazmat suits came to clean the kitchen and Nellie's room. The board had me send them photos of myself daily in case Nellie killed me and they had to identify me. I quickly moved out, and since Nellie avoided the other girls, they decided to stay. I declined to submit Nellie for an expulsion because I felt bad for her and thought that moving would stop her obsession with me. I was incredibly misguided. I was happy that my new roommates were normal and no Nellie incidents happened for 2 weeks. I did have a large uptick in random daily Facebook and Instagram follower requests from blank profile users. I knew who was behind this, but I was avoiding any Nellie-related thoughts. I was having night terrors, and the more I thought about her, the worse they got. I blocked another user as I sat down with Reagan and Charlotte in an almost empty lecture hall. Charlotte nudged me as Nellie entered the room, bypassing her usual seat. I felt myself freeze up as she entered our row and began walking towards me, staring at me with her dead eyes. "Don't fucking sit next to me," I said, shocked by my bravery. Nellie responded by sitting 10 seats down from me, not breaking eye contact, and I considered that a win. After class, I went home and then walked to the store. I forgot to grab a cart, so I quickly turned around to fetch one and ran into someone standing directly behind me. It was Nellie. Did she follow me from my apartment? Does she know where I live? My heart stopped as I backed into another aisle and Nellie followed. I walked into another aisle, but Nellie followed me, matching my pace until I went into another aisle and she began to run. I ran away terrified, and Nellie only stopped when I got to the security desk. Security offered to call the police, but I declined and gave them my email to send me the footage of Nellie chasing me. I had to report Nellie, but since I had class that day, I decided to report her the next day. 2 hours later, as I waited for Reagan to walk with me to class, I caught Nellie staring at me from across the street. But she didn't approach me and walked with the crowd towards campus. Minutes later, Reagan found me and we headed to class together. I walked beside Reagan, past the buildings and alleyways, until a rock caught in my shoe and I bent down to fix it. Reagan switched to the right side of me to look at a billboard, and when I removed the rock, we began walking again. I turned my head to speak when Nellie jumped out of an alleyway and onto Reagan. Her hands were outstretched and clasped around Reagan's neck. Words can't explain how terrified I was. Nellie let go immediately and Reagan grabbed my arm, walking forward. Nellie began walking shoulder to shoulder with me, her head turned sideways at an unnatural angle. The look in her eyes was not human. Reagan told me to run, and we bolted across the street. Nellie paused, but we walked away. Traffic stopped her from crossing. We stopped, and Reagan leaned against the fence as I bent over and covered my mouth, trying not to vomit. After a while, we continued our walk to class in silence. We made it to the lobby and headed for the staircase, but Nellie stood at the bottom of it. "I won't let her walk behind me," I said, voice shaking. Reagan nodded, and we followed a large crowd after Nellie walked upstairs, only to find her holding the door open for everyone. Nellie stared at me through the crowd until everyone but Reagan and I had passed through. "It's okay. You can go first," Reagan said while smiling at Nellie. I was shocked at how composed she was, and even more shocked that Nellie listened. When we sat down in class, Nellie tried to sit behind me, but someone was saving the seat for his friend, so Nellie left. I didn't pay attention to that lecture. I sat there shocked and terrified while Reagan hunched low in her seat, rubbing her neck. I felt horrible for bringing Reagan into this Nellie crap. I knew then that Nellie needed to be expelled no matter what. The next day, I reported Nellie to the Student Safety Board, and they raised the issue to the disciplinary board. I submitted a lengthy report detailing everything Nellie had done. I included Reagan, Bella, Poppy, and Sam as witnesses and gave photographic evidence of the threats, the calls, the smeared poop and blood, clogged showers and toilets, and the stalking. The next week, I met with the disciplinary board to go over their conclusions. They informed me that they had reviewed my report, met up with Nellie to give her a copy of my report, discussed my accusations, and had come to a conclusion. They acknowledged that everything I reported was factual, but they didn't think Nellie had any malicious intent. So they would grant a no-contact order, but Nellie wouldn't be expelled. I was completely perplexed by their conclusion and asked them what Nellie had said about all of this, but they refused to tell me anything. I was at a loss for words. I couldn't believe Nellie was given my full report, knew everything that I said, and knew the witnesses' names. The school put us all in danger, yet they wouldn't allow me to know if Nellie had even denied her actions. I was devastated. I felt my mind go numb. I knew at that moment they didn't care. They were going to prioritize a predator. So, with no other options, I agreed to the no-contact order. The worker tried to get me to sign a non-disclosure agreement so that I wouldn't speak about what Nellie did to me or how the school dealt with my case, but I refused to sign it. The next day, I received an email confirmation that Nellie had agreed to the no-contact order, but I knew that meant nothing. Nellie wouldn't get help and she would never stop stalking me. My sophomore year was plagued by a relentless pattern of Nellie stalking me from place to place, sitting next to me in class, standing next to me in hallways, and staring at me daily. Her actions were so unnerving and obvious that multiple strangers warned me about her. I reported these incidents every time they occurred, and the school always responded by stating they would remind Nellie of the no-contact order. They never took any further steps to help me. In sophomore year, Nellie found other roommates, and in them, new victims. She was evicted from an off-campus apartment, and her new roommates, who once sat with her, began to sit far away from Nellie. They looked terrified. They looked like me. Having incidents happen weekly and having to see Nellie daily made it impossible for me to move on. I was always in flight or freeze mode, terrified by what Nellie had done and still might do to me. I became a sunken-in, miserable, and defeated version of myself. I wanted revenge, a natural result of the boiling rage I felt, now at a constant simmer after Nellie was coddled by a university that failed to shell out even a minor consequence for the terror that she imposed on me. I wanted Nellie to suffer in the exact same way she made me suffer. I know if I had just grown a pair at any point in those early months, I could have saved myself and others from suffering. Nellie was likely stalking me from the moment I met her. I just hadn't realized it, and it weighs heavily on me to know that I played a large part in my own suffering. No matter what I write, I can't begin to recreate the evil that radiated off of Nellie. I have daily night terrors. I don't go into new situations. I don't speak to new people, and I don't make friends. I'm not nice to strangers because I don't want to invite something like this into my life again. Revenge came on graduation day, when Nellie's name didn't appear in the book of graduates. She had failed second year. But despite everything, I couldn't help but think that I was a bad person for being content with Nellie failing. Maybe I was just happy that I could finally move on. Okay. This is a crazy story. I am so sorry, OP, that you've had to deal with all of this. Honestly, I'm sorry to all the OPs that have had to deal with all of this crazy stuff. This is crazy. And you should have never had to deal with any of that. But absolutely terrifying. This girl, absolutely. Nellie, absolutely terrifying. Like, I can't even. Like, that sounds straight out of a horror movie. I'm just gonna say it, a horror movie. Like, I don't even know what I would do if I was in your shoes. Be completely terrified and, like, disgusted of all the things she did. No. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And hopefully you never see her again. Let's not meet, literally, ever again. Alright, besties. Well, that is all for tonight's Let's Not Meet stories. Some of those stories definitely had me double checking behind me in my door. Maybe you too. So, yeah. Thanks for sitting with me and getting scared with me. Hopefully these don't give you nightmares like they're probably gonna give me. But hey, perfect for the month of October. And besties, before you go, don't forget our link tree is in the description below. If you click it, you can find all of our social media pages so you can keep up with everything happening with Midnight Talks. And also, please go check out our Patreon. On Patreon, you can get early access to episodes, bonus mini episodes, behind the scenes content, and even special polls where you get to help pick what we read next or talk about next. Basically, it's like joining the inner circle of Midnight Talks, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. There is a free option on there. You do not have to pay. Please don't feel like you have to pay. Obviously, if you pay, like, we appreciate it so much for the membership, but you don't have to pay. You can do it for free, and we had a lot of free membership perks on there. So just please go follow us on Patreon. It would mean a lot to us. And thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. Stay cozy, maybe keep the blanket a little tighter than usual. And remember, sometimes the scariest stories aren't in Reddit threads, they're out there waiting. Just joking, hopefully not. Catch you next time on Midnight Screams. Love you, besties. Good night.